Should you get a survey done every time you buy a property? Yes. Granted, there's some caveats, but for the most part, I guess should we go into the story or should we go into why it's important? I'll just tell you the story. So, if you've been watching any of my videos, my story, anything, you probably saw a few days ago I was on my property in America, and I was driving my Jeep around and going up and down some of my hills, driving through a ditch I have, all on my property. No one else's. I didn't go on anyone else's property. This gentleman comes out of nowhere, essentially starts yelling at me for being on my property. I had no idea who he was. Anyway, so that was problem number one. And then problem number two is today we finally got a survey on my lot here to actually know where it goes to and what belongs to me and what belongs to my neighbors. And the one lady literally lost, just went mental. We were just standing there, the guy's, with his little GPS thing, finding mistakes and marking everything, and she's just screaming and yelling and videotaping us, and I'm just standing there, smiling, waving, we're just surveying property, right? So, moral of the story, that is why it's so important to survey your property. So you know exactly where your property lines are, right? And sometimes, let's say you're buying a house in a neighborhood and maybe you have a fenced in yard. Most of the time that should be accurate, right? Because it's been there for years and years and there shouldn't be any disputes, right? Where everyone knows where their fence is, right? But in my case, my property butts up to 5 or 6 other properties on one end and 2 on each side, and then there's the road, right? So, the issue obviously came up, not to the left, not to the right, but to the back property. 2 of my neighbors have a fence, the other ones don't have a fence. And I've been seeing over the years people gradually coming in closer and closer to what I thought was my property. And why was that an issue? Well, it's an issue because it was uncut land, it was a field with trees, and there were being trees cut, there was being their crap dumped on what I thought was mine, and right, it's just annoying, right? So I wanted to figure out exactly where the lines are, right? So that's what happened today. Got yelled at, freaked out. But if I would have just done this from the very first, from purchasing the house, 5-6 years ago, this would have never been an issue, right? So that's why it's important. If you're buying a property that doesn't have a fence in, that's just a bunch of acreage with a bunch of neighbors with no fences or no landmarks, you just kind of roughly know where the property is, because I was wrong and obviously they were wrong, right? So just make sure that you don't get crazy neighbors that are freaking out. And I didn't even say anything about their stuff being on my property. We're just marking it, right? She just decided to freak out for no good reason, just for staking our, she essentially got a free survey, right? So I'm the one who paid for it, right? And that's why usually surveys aren't done by agents, because they suck. It's usually a few $1,000s. If you have a property that's big like mine, it is a few $1,000s, and it's literally a waste. It's not a waste of money, but it's a waste of money just so you can tell that person that this is where the line is, and obviously throw a fence up if no one complies. But it's so important to know exactly where the property belongs, right? Because every single one of the neighbors that butts up to the back of my property, the first 2, they've been throwing all their debris from their yard into my property, right? And it's not a big deal because it's wooded, but that wooded area doesn't look wooded anymore when there's a bunch of trees and logs and cut grass and all this other crap that's thrown there. It just looks like a pile of garbage, right? Then the next people over, this is really the only reason I got the surveys. They were starting to cut trees down, and dump all their stuff in there. So I always kind of thought their shed was on my property, and now we have figured out that it is. I think I own 18 feet or something like that of their shed. So I'm the proud new owner of a shed, super excited, just gonna make a hole in the back so I have my own access and throw a little wall up on the property line, and we got extra storage, boys. Just kidding, I'm not gonna do that. But anyway, and then same thing with two neighbors over. I also have a chicken coop with chickens, so if anyone would like fresh eggs, let me know. Or a chicken. We can have a little chicken cook-off. And I think two more lots over is where the guy that yelled at me was. So he wasn't here today. I'm sure he was looking through the window thinking at what a dumbass he was for yelling at me the other day. And then the guy next door, he had just a huge pile of garbage on my property, right? So obviously, maybe no one knew who it belonged to. Now we do, so we gotta have to somehow rectify it. But it is so, so important. Don't be dumb, stubborn, whatever you want to call it, like me. Get your property surveyed if you buy it. If you buy a plot of land that's 5 or 6 or whatever many acres it is, get it surveyed. Know exactly where your property goes and where your neighbors is, and avoid all this headache and getting yelled at by people, because it's really annoying. But we will keep you in the loop to let you know how my new shed goes, my chicken and my chicken coops, and how everyone else responds to them not being able to use my land as their dumping ground. So, moral of the story, get your property surveyed, do it when you buy the house. I know it's annoying, I know it costs money, and it sucks, but when you don't have fences, you know what they say about fences, right? They make good neighbors. So when you don't have fences, not to say you have bad neighbors, but you can have disagreements because that guy thinks something, you think something else. So get your property surveyed. And that is the second time this week that I have been yelled at on my own property, not doing anything crazy, just being on my own land, minding my own business. So, yeah, great stuff. But anyway, get your properties surveyed, and I know I got to get better at this. Every single property that I've bought, I've never gotten a survey, and this is the only time I have had to get a survey because of all the issues I've been having. So, just pay the $1,000, $2,000, whatever it costs to get that survey done when you're purchasing a house. Unless it's clear cut and there's markers and you know where everything's at, then obviously don't bother. But fun fact, most surveyors, they use rebar to drive into the ground. So if you have a metal detector and you roughly know where that rebar is, you could find the old stakes from when it was initially done, right? So that might be a way to do it yourself if you want to save a few bucks. But then you can't, if your neighbor argues, right, you need the actual survey. But anywho, I'm gonna say it again. If you're buying a property that doesn't have a fence, that does have acreage, that does have a bunch of neighbors, do yourself a favor and get it surveyed, pay it a few $1,000s, and know exactly where your land is. So that way you know, your neighbors know, and there's no argument, discussion, or anything else in the future. So hope this video helped, and if you have any questions, let me know.